Steven Sink, also known as Pagan Zero. I'm here today to talk about lighting with Mandelbulber. This will be part one of 3-part lighting series in Mandelbulber. One thing to note, this is not Mandelbulb 3D. This is Mandelbulber. If you're looking for a tutorial on Mandelbulb 3D, you will be very confused because this will not help you at all. Hopefully it will help you with Mandelbulber. If you're new to Mandelbulber, I suggest you start with part 1 of my Mandelbulber tutorial series, Keyframing in Mandelbulber. You can find a link to it in the description below, as well as links to part 2 and part 3 when I complete them. All of my other Mandelbulber tutorials, and you also find a link to a couple hundred of my 3D fractal animation music videos at YouTube. You can find me at Facebook and our forum page at Facebook called Mandelbulber, where I'm one of the helpful, friendly, and hopefully somewhat knowledgeable admins that can assist you if you have any problems or troubleshoot some issues, or just we can all in amazement at your wonderful explorations of the fractal realms. Everything I'll be showing you will be using the video card to render fractals with something called OpenCL. You can use your CPU to render if you need to, but it will be a lot slower. If you need some help setting up your video card, I'll walk you through the basics in my keyframing with in Mandelbulber tutorial. I'll assume you're ready to rock, so let's rock and light it up. There will be 3 parts to this series, and this is just the first part. Part 2 will deal with volumetric lights. Part 3 will deal with random and traplights, also called fake lights. But this part 1 will be just basic lighting. We're going to talk about placing of lights using 3D cursor, using distance control, and placing lights behind objects. We'll talk about the properties of lights, intensity, visibility, size, and color. We'll be adding lights to animations and then animating the light position, its properties, and color. I'll be using Mandelbulber 3.15-Alpha 3. Hopefully the final version of 3.15 will be released. Everything I'm doing, though, will be found in any of the versions of Mandelbulber going back a few years. All right, let's dive into it. Pull up Mandelbulber and take a look at it. First thing we want to do is we want to go over here to the effects pane, and we'll see that there's ray tracing, volumetric, background, lights, and post effects. What we want to do is deal with lights. So I've clicked on lights, and these are the default options. The light pane is divided into common light options. That's the main light, and just lights in general, which is casting shadows and penetrating lights and soft shadow cone angle. We're not going to get into that. That's going to be advanced lighting. We'll touch on it real briefly. I will point out that there are basically one main light, the main light source from which all light from our scene is rendered. And then we have something called custom lights. And there are 4 of them. There are 4 custom lights that are off by default. Looking at our box here for main light source, we have intensity, visibility, size, color, horizontal angle, and vertical angle. Let's click on auto refresh. Let's go up. There we go. And there's the basic Mandelbulb. And here's our main light source. And you notice that it's coming from 45-degree angle that way and a vertical angle, 45-degree angle that way. And we can see what happens when we change that. There's the light, and I can move that around. And you see that the light travels around the object. If I wanted to be straight on the object like that, you notice it's positioned relative to the camera. So if I leave this checked, then the position of the light changes with the camera rotation. When it is unchecked, then the main light source position is set with angles relative to the scene coordinate system, which in other words, if I click this position relative to the camera, then wherever I'm moving this scene, the light will stay at the same angle to the camera. So at the default of 45, wherever I move in the scene, the light will always come at about that angle towards my scene. We'll leave that to the default. Personally, I'm a big fan of straight-on lights sometimes, depending on what I'm doing. Particularly if I'm going through a tunnel or cavernous fractal, in which case light coming at an angle will not render the scene in front of me. I also like to pretend that I'm a fractal astronaut exploring the depths and deep dark reaches of my fractal, and I have a miner's hat or some kind of light on that I'm shining into the depths. But this is going to be our main light source angle. A main light source, this is the angle of which it's at horizontal and vertical. There's the intensity of the light. If I were to have the light, then my scene slowly gets darker and darker. Brighter and brighter. Go back to the default of 1. Okay, real quickly, visibility of the main light would really come into play when you, for example, have the position relative to the camera turned off so that the light is coming from another angle, particularly so that it looks like, for example, it's a sun or a moon. Visibility will increase the brightness of the light which is visible in the sky. Size will increase the size of the main light, which is visible on a sky. So when you're using the main light as a light source that's supposed to look like the moon or the sun, then you can change the visibility in the light. And otherwise, the intensity is something that you're going to play with more often when you're not actually looking at the light. When the light is just lighting a scene, these two parameters are not so important, visibility and size. Color, obviously, which we haven't touched on, the color of the main light, we can change it to light blue, and then that puts a light blue on our scene, or a dark blue, or say a yellow tinge to our fractal scene. And then we can always put that back to the reset to default, right-clicking on it and set to default. Okay, wanted to add that real quickly, explaining the intensity and visibility of the main light source, which only come into play usually when you're using the main light source as a sun or moon in the sky. So, customized lights. We have the main light that's on. We'll leave all of it at the default. We'll start flipping on custom light. And the custom lights are by default roughly arranged around the fractal at various quadrants. So light 1, you'll notice that it's at 3, -3, 3. If we engage light 2, that's at -3, -3, 0. Light 3, -3, you get the idea. Roughly arranged, and if we pull out a ways here, pull out a long ways, let me darken these up. This is the color of the various lights, which I can, which is showing you changing on the fly, will get you an indication of where each light is and what color it is and what it's doing. And now let's start placing these lights other than just having them as default locations. For example, custom light number 1. Place by mouse. I can set it right there on the fractal surface. You'll see the coordinates are right below that X, Y, Z in the distance. Boink. And I'll place light 2 there, boink. And we'll place light 3 there, boink. And we'll place light 4 here. Now I have placed all 4 lights into the scene. You see that their coordinates are listed here, and then the intensity. The intensity, obviously, is just how bright this thing is. I'll show you with this purple light. We'll just start doubling the intensity, and you'll see that quickly it'll start washing out the entire scene. We can take it back to the default, which is still pretty bright. For this scene, we just want it showing like that. In fact, for all of these, I want them much less intense. I'm just going to have their, have their intensity. There it is, sorry. And then On our custom light options, we also have visibility, which the default is 1, and the size, which is 1. You'll notice that if I increase the visibility, it increases the visibility of my lights. Size as well increases the size without... There you go. But the default option 1, 1 is what we're going to leave, and we're going to do our animating with just 1 and 1 as the custom light option. It also affects random lights, which we're not going to get into right now. All right, there's one more thing that we didn't look at, and that's placement distance by mouse. When, for example, I turn on light 1 and I place it right there on my fractal, how close it gets to that fractal is determined by this placement distance by mouse, in which it's set at almost 0.5. The pop-up description, which you should really, when you're in doubt about a parameter or what it does, you'll see that these nice pop-ups come up. For example, the penetrating light soft shadow cone angle is described and all that. Here we go, placement distance by mouse. Controls the distance from the fractal surface where light will be placed with mouse pointer. When it's 0, the light will be set on the fractal surface. Higher value moves the light towards the camera. So in other words, as we would increase that, if I were to put it like that, that puts it way out away from the shape. Whereas a value of 0 puts my light see, I can't even see it. Where did it go? Reset it to default, put it back here, and there's our light, and we can see it. We're going to talk about place light behind the object, which is if we click that, and then I do place by mouse, light number 4, which is this dark blue one, and I go like this, you'll see that now my cursor and the mouse has the object behind, in which case, boom, there's that blue light behind. Let me take place light behind the object off, and then that way I can put it back on. Now, what if I want to place the light, say, over here, hanging off in this corner here? How can I do that? Well, then I'm just going to have to go in there in the parameters and set that. I can also place another object here by, say, placing a plane or a square or a cube, some kind of primitive object, just so that I can get a bead on where that is. And if you have a good technique for placing a light, say, right there in that space, tell me what it is, because I don't know what it is. I just know by trial and error. I'll usually place an object, a light on the surface, and then by slowly moving the parameters out, I got the purple light to be out here. If I wanted that purple light up, let's see, let's look at our little legend here. I want to change the Z-axis, so I go to my purple light, the Z-axis, let's double that. Oh, look at that. That starts raising up, and I've raised it up, and I've roughly got it in that space over there, which I would need to take it back further in the Y-axis, and so on. You see what I'm doing there. Okay, so those are the 4 basic lights. I have the main light, which is lighting up the entire scene, which if I take off, the scene is now lit by the auxiliary lights. Well, custom lights would be the preferred term. But you'll notice that even with all of the lights off, I still have, and then we turn the main light off, I still have some backlit stuff going on. Well, that's coming from over here. There's another pane altogether in the background, and then we change the brightness of the background, which in this case, to get a totally dark fractal, we'd have to turn the brightness of the background. So there's both a light coming from the background, which is not thought about very often, and then there's the main light source, boom, and then there can be these custom lights. And then parts 2 and 3 we'll talk about random lights and fake lights, which we're already going to look at right now. So that is the basics of lights. All right, let's take a look at animating some of these features then. For example, any of these values where the light is right now can be animated. If we right-click on it, add to keyframe animation, We're going to add the parameters. We also want to add the intensity. Add to keyframe animation. And we'll do a quick, let's go over here to keyframe animation, add a keyframe, and I talk about all of this in my keyframing with Mandelbulber tutorial. But let's add a keyframe. And we'll notice that in the parameters of the keyframe, it should have main aux light position 1, X, Y, and Z, and the main light intensity, which matches our value here. We can animate any of those parameters. Let me turn on my show keyframe preview thumbnails, refresh the table. There we go. Now right here, that's where the light is. But if I place the mouse there, if I place the light there by the mouse, add that keyframe, now we see that the light is over here. But if I don't add these parameters to the keyframe, they will stay, that light will stay wherever it is. If I have 40 keyframes, that light will stay wherever it is by the default. So I've gone through a very long video before, and I forgot to add these parameters to the keyframe, and I had to go back and add lights individually throughout the entire keyframe. So don't forget to add the parameters of those, particularly the intensity. You'll want to change because as you get closer to it, it'll just be too bright, and you want to back that off. You can even add, if I right click on this color here, you can add to keyframe animation, in which case you'll see a red, green, and blue value down here, and I can change that. Let's make it slowly morph from purple to green. Select this keyframe number 1 here, modify keyframe, and now the light is green. So if I were to animate this out, the light would change from this corner of the fractal here, and it would slowly move across the surface, and would also change in brightness. It would also change in intensity and in color. Let me add our main angle to keyframe animation. And we look back down here to our keyframes, we'll see that the main light alpha has been negative 45. And I want to add the vertical angle as well. Add keyframe. Like that. 45, 45, 45. Let me add one more keyframe here, like that. And I'll show you real quickly. I can change these parameters right here in the keyframe without having to go back here to the light value. I could have made that, for example, the main light 0. Oops, well, 1, 0 will do it. And I can make, I don't know, the color. I'm going to put in a random value of 45 and 256. What did that do to the color up here? I can't even see the color. It's black of some sort. That's why I can't see it. Well, my random parameters didn't work in that case. I'll do it this way and then modify the keyframe that way. But I can still go and mess with, let's go minus 90 on the position of the light here. So then when I actually go back and render all of this out, show animation, well, that's what I was rendering last. Let me just throw this in a new folder really quickly. New folder, test, good enough for government work. And we'll render this out real quickly. It should take all of a few seconds at the default render size, which if I go over here to image size, it's 800 by 600. We go back to effects, where our lights, you'll see our light parameters, that horizontal angle is changing. This light is moving, the intensity is changing, the color is slowly changing, although we can't really see that very quickly. We're at 90, we're 100 of 200 frames. So we're at a green light. We're slowly going to approach this blue light and slowly approach where that blue light is. As you'll see, the light is morphing and changing. And this is I'm not using my fastest video card here. That's quick enough for us. We'll go show animation. And it's done. And when we look at the animation, we'll see that the light travels from here to there. It changes. See, look at that. And we'll also notice that the main light is moving, which is a little more subtler and harder to see. Let's add another keyframe, where in this one we'll place the light here and we change it to dark red, or bright red rather. Render out a few, oops, sorry. That was bad of me. Let me do that again. Place my mouse here. I forgot to change the keyframe before I did the rendering, in which case that would not work at all. My apologies. Let's back to red and select that keyframe, modify it. There we go. Now it took. And then we'll just ignore those few extra frames that didn't change color, because that would be very subtly. But you see it slowly goes from blue to red. We have a transitional purple in the middle. And there's our scene lights. And we're... Alright, there's our 300 frames. And you'll see the light goes from one end to the other as it changes light, and it changes intensity. There. That's basic lighting, animating of lights, placing them on the animation and getting them to move around. You've now done a lot of cool stuff. One quick trick I will show you, just for no charge at all. You've seen the basic of this. I'm going to add, let's say, 6 keyframes here total. Let me go back to this first one. Let me add in 4 lights. Let me add add the keyframe animation, add 3 lights, add the keyframe animation. I forgot to add the intensity, so add intensity of number 2, intensity of number 3, turn on number 4 here, add the XYZs to the keyframe animation, add the intensity to the keyframe animation. And I'm going to also add the color to the keyframe animation on all of these. So we've just added a bunch of parameters dealing with color and lights. And when we look at our keyframes, you'll see we've got main light, aux light 4, 3, 2, and 1. Intensity of color and all that. And the XYZ parameters. Now if I want to go back here to 1... and I can just go place my lights. I'll go place light 1 here. In fact, I'm going to move into my fractal a little. Place light 2 here. I'm going to go around in a pattern like that. I'm going to modify keyframe. And then I'm going to go here. We're going to move in a little bit. And I'm going to put, instead of putting light 1 here, I'm going to drop it a quadrant and put it down here. Light 2 is going to go here. I'm just going to keep going around the circle with my lights like that. Modify. Oh, let me spin that around a bit and do that and do that. And then I want to do reset to default, so the light's going to come out from a ways, and this one I'm going to place here, I'll place that one there, and I'll leave that one there where it was. Modify the keyframe, go to 3, double click it to show to get the keyframe to render, and then I'm going to place my lights again in we really need to be closer to the surface. In this case, I'm going to go, I put 1 here, then I put it here, then I put it here. So now I'm going to put it here. I'll put light 2 there, light 3 here, light 4 there. And you know what? I didn't change any colors, but I'll go back later on. Let me modify keyframe. Boom. 4. Move in a little bit or a lot. In this case, I'm going to put light 1 there, light 2 there. And you'll notice that it's automatically changing the intensity and the size as I've gone in closer to these fractals, those lights should be blinding, but they're not. So where are we at? 4, modify keyframe. Let me go to 5 here. Zoom way in. Actually, let me use 4 as a base, and I'll just modify 5. So here we go. Place by mouse. 1's going to be there. 2 here. 3 here. And 4 quickly there. Select 5 and modify it. Boom. Hopefully we only got like one more to go. Yes. That's going to take us all the way back to the default. Place mouse there. Place by mouse there. Place by mouse there. Place by mouse here. Some of those are too bright, so we're going to turn them down a bit. It looks like that one's too bright, and I don't see any of them changing. I don't see any of them changing. Why are they not changing? Oh, because I took auto refresh off. Sorry. There we go. And modify keyframe. Now, delete all images out of that. I'm going to render this, and while it's all rendering, hopefully if it's going quick enough, we can see that the lights will start moving around our scene. In fact, I'm going to pause this, and through the magic of editing, we'll come back in about 3 minutes and 14 seconds. Okay, as we get into closer to the fractal, we see that the lights have shrunk down a bit, and they're still moving around, and we're still rendering, and we're about halfway through. All right, as we hit 400 here, we see the lights are moving through the scene, and if I would have spent more than 15 seconds with them, I could have gotten the lights to go around in some kind of pattern. But as you'll see, the lights will be darting around, and when it's done rendering here, we'll take a look at it. And we're pulling into the home stretch, and just a few more to go. All right. So when we look at this 600 frame animation with lights, we'll see the lights moving from one quadrant to another, from leaving the scene and approaching the scene, shooting across the scene. The white one there shot across the scene. Yeah, so we just got a constant movement of the lights through the scene, just by simply placing them in different quadrants along each keyframe. And I did it very clumsily and not very intelligently. But the more random, the less it looks like a planned clockwork. Instead, it looks like 4 firefly alive thingies that are crawling through the fractal, ideally. Okay, that about wraps it up for the basic lighting part 1. Next video, we'll get into volumetric lights, and then we'll do part 3 with random and traplights. Thank you much. I'm Steve Sink, Pagan Zero, for Mandelbulber. See you on Facebook, and see you in the fractal realms.